Hello, everyone. Good evening and Merry Christmas. My name is Patricia Meredith, and I am an author of historical and cozy mysteries. And if you're joining me tonight, I will be baking a recipe from my new cozy mystery, Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman, which takes place at the North Pole and includes two recipes in the back of the book. So, if you're not familiar with my work, I am also an author of historical mysteries. I have three in one series called the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries, and then I have one in a new series featuring Anna Catherine Green, the mother of detective fiction. And if you followed my channel at all, you will see very quickly that I love talking about Anna Catherine Green quite a bit. So I have been switching gears and talking more about Christmas. But in the past, because I am a historical mystery author, I have shared recipes every year. So the last 2 years, I have shared recipes from 19th century cookbooks because one of the main research that I do for my books in order to ensure an accurate representation of the past is to collect recipes and cleaning recipes and etiquette and all of those things, health remedies, all of those are to be found in 19th century cookbooks. And so if you subscribe to my channel and look down in the playlists, you will see that I have 3 recipes from 2 years ago and then 3 recipes from last year. And they were from a collection of different cookbooks. Like this one is the Compendium of Cookery and Reliable Recipes. And I just love collecting old cookbooks like this. I know this looks terrible, but to me that just speaks to its history, to its use in the kitchen, right? Obviously this one has been well loved. So I cooked a couple recipes from that one. I've cooked a couple from this one, A Book for a Cook, which was a Pillsbury cookbook. This one's from 1905. The Compendium of Cookery, I believe, is from 1890 something. 1890. Yep, I got it. 1890 is this one. And then I've got several other cookbooks that I'll be featuring in the future. This one is one that I recently picked up, the New Delineator Recipes. And I love finding little personal notes in the front. She's got her own personal recipe in the front of that. So 19th century cookbooks are awesome. They're fantastic. But for my new book, Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman, I could not rely on 19th century cookbooks because it takes place today. Now, it does take place at the North Pole. It features a talking snowman named Sam Shovel, and which is why I've got my fedora on, because he wears a fedora because he is inspired by the great Sam Spade of Dashiell Hammett novels, his series of detectives. So Sam Spade, if you're not familiar with that name, he is featured in the Maltese Falcon and movies and TV shows and things like that. He was a noir detective of the time. So he greatly inspired Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman and my main character, Sam, though he is Sam Shovel, and he is a snowman who is only alive for 12 days at Christmas, and he has to solve the murder of Mr. O. Tannenbaum, the leading Christmas tree salesman at the North Pole. And he works with Nick and Nora Claus, who are the lead Santa Clauses at the North Pole over all of the franchises of Santas throughout the world. So we get to meet lots of Santas from all over, because one of the things that I love about Christmas is discovering new traditions. Every family, every culture has different traditions at this time of year, depending on where they're at, what country they're at. And not everybody has Santa, but actually quite a few places do. And not just because of American culture seeping into other cultures. He's actually featured in several different places. And I love finding the different ways that he is represented and featuring him in all the different ways. So when I was writing this book, I had to do a lot of research into other Santas of other cultures. And one of the ones that ended up being featured, which you can see a whole list of the featured Santa Clauses, Santas, in the front of my book, the featured Santas. So the top one right there, Baba Noël, is the Egyptian Santa. And so in which chapter is it? I probably should have marked this before I started, huh? But Sam and a gnome, a Yule lad who is following him around, named Curtis, they are on the hunt for the murder of Mr. O. Tannenbaum, and they end up coming across all the different Santas and then going and interviewing them and getting to know them a little bit as as they're investigating. And so then in chapter 11, we have Noel, Noel. And that's when we come across the Baba Noel and one other Santa. So I'm going to read to you from that. Merry Christmas, Angelique, and everybody else in the chat who hasn't said hi yet. Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining me live. So here we go. Now mix that all together until it forms a nice dough, and voila, as you say. While that sits for an hour, we can work on making the agamea. Curtis and I followed the sweet smell of honey and cinnamon to the happily lit outdoor kitchen of the local hotel. Huddled around the kitchen stove were two small, round individuals that could only be a couple of Santas. Their cheeks were nice and rosy from the mix of cold air and heat coming from the oven. One of them was Père Noël, and the other was Baba Noël, who was clearly in the process of teaching an Egyptian recipe to the French Santa. Making spirits bright with a little baking? Curtis asked as we approached. Both Noels looked up with a smile as we neared. And then they interview them, and I won't read that part because it's going to give some stuff away. I'll have to read the book in order to find out what happens. But we will jump ahead to later. Baba comes back. He went to look for the wooden press that you use to make the final part of the cookie. And so we'll get to that. So they're making Kahk, which is an Egyptian tradition to make around Christmas time or around, I think it's called Eid, E-I-D, which I believe has begun that celebration. And then they count down to Epiphany. And so let's see. So he comes back and he has the wooden press. Now we can begin making the filling. He set down the press and clapped his hands together, rubbing them in anticipation. This is my favorite part, and it's mine too, and you'll see why. So first we need to melt the butter. You do that, Père, and I'll measure the flour. We'll whisk the flour in the pan once the butter is melted. Then we just remove it from the heat to add the honey and pistachios and sesame seeds. Then back onto the heat, stirring it until it thickens, then back off the heat to cool until we can form it into small balls. But then the dough should have rested enough, and then we'll be able to start putting it all together. And so as they're making Kahk, I thought it would be fun tonight to walk you through the process of making it yourselves. These are a delicious cookie. They're honey and cinnamon and pistachios. It's this incredible blend of flavors. And it's just something that I had never had before until this year, but it will definitely be a tradition. I'll be making these cookies every year because the agamea on its own, the filling, I could just eat spoonfuls of that. It's so good. It's so good. So if you're looking for the recipe, you can find it on my website. You can find it on my website, which is patricia-meredith.com. Let me find that banner. So I put it down here. Right there. So if you head there, I posted a blog today about this video, inviting people to come join me live. And then you can also find the recipe there and what I just read you out of the book. It will also have links there where you can go and order a copy of the book. Like I said, in the back of the book is the recipe. Let me show you that. So in the back of this book, there are actually two recipes. There is Baba Noel's Egyptian Kahk, which is right there. And then also Mary, the gingerbread man, Mary's gingerbread cookies before the carrot edition. And you'll understand that reference when you read the book and you'll see what happens. So I might share some of that next week, because next week is when I'm going to make the gingerbread cookies. So if you join me next Thursday at 7 p.m., I know it's late for our East Coast friends, but this was the best time for me to be able to do this live without having to film it ahead of time and then edit it together. So next Thursday, again at 7 o'clock, I will be baking Mary's gingerbread cookies. So tonight I'll be making Baba Noel's Egyptian Kahk. Now, these nice laminated recipe cards are available when you purchase the book through the Christmas Deluxe package. So this is available only, I've been carrying it around for a week, so it's getting a little worn. But this special deluxe box can be ordered through my website at patricia-meredith.com again. It's only available there. It's the only way to get it. And it'll come to your house decorated like this, and then inside is a whole bunch of fun stuff that has to do with the book. So of course you'll have a wrapped copy of the book itself. It is signed and says Merry Christmas inside of it. You'll also get a hot cocoa mix with 3 unassembled snowman marshmallows. And it says it is Sam's favorite drink, and you'll understand when you read the book. Two laminated recipe cards. So it is those recipes that are found in the back of the book. I like to laminate them because that's how I keep my recipes from getting marks all over them and burn marks and, all the splatter and everything from multiple baking. So I keep all of my cards. Whenever I find a recipe that I really like, I print it out, I laminate it. And if I have any notes, I add those notes in there before I laminate it. But you can also you can write over the laminate too. But that way they last a lot longer. So that's where that came from. And then I also made some homemade bookmarks with a nice snowflake dangle on there. So perfect for the book, right? It's got a cookie cutter, and these come in a variety of shapes. I have a whole bunch of them, so I just throw one in there for you. A bunch of stickers. There's a bunch of like snowman and Santa stickers. A freshly picked candy cane from the Cane's North Pole farm. And again, that is featured in the book. In fact, you get to find out why a candy cane has a crook on it and how they make and package and grow these at the North Pole. And then my favorite thing, hold on, before that, a tea candle, which I have some that smell like cinnamon. Yeah, this one's cinnamon, and then I have some that smell like gingerbread, or like ginger. And then probably my favorite thing that's in the entire package is this lovely peppermint soap, and this was handmade by the Soapy Squirrel Company, which is a local gal here. She's based out of more like Woodland Park, which is near Colorado Springs, and her let's see, it's called Honey Mountain Hives is the website, and she went out of her way. We met at a farmer's market, and I was telling her about my book, and we were like, oh, it would be really fun if you could make a special soap that was only sold through me to go with my book. And so she was able to come up with this design, the snow globe, snowman, and Christmas tree that match my cover. So it's perfect. So she actually sent me a bunch of molds, and we were looking at ones that were like snowman shaped and Christmas tree shaped, because I was like, well, it's Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman. That would be perfect. And then she sent me this mold. She was like, oh my goodness, I just came across a great one. It's a snow globe. So what do you think about doing that? And I was like, oh my goodness, let me show you, because I hadn't revealed the cover yet. So she didn't know what the cover was. I was like, this is perfect. And she was able to put a snowman and a Christmas tree inside of it and then paint it to look exactly like it. So these are hand painted. They are real soaps that you can use. I have one that I'm using. It smells so wonderful. It smells like fresh peppermint. It's so wonderful. So you get one of these, and then all of that stuff in this box, and that is available through my website. So order now if you want it by Christmas, because we're getting closer and closer to when it's going to take longer to get it to you. So be sure to check that out. Okay, so that's where you get the recipe cards. I think we're ready to bake now. I've done my whole spiel thing for the beginning. So let's see who's checked in with us tonight. Yes, hello, Kay is here, and my parents are here. Hello. So yeah, all right, so we're gonna start making kahk. Now, Andrew, my husband, is the audiobook narrator for this book, and I set him a really hard task of having to look up all of the pronunciations for all of these different words, because like I said, there's a lot of different Santas featured from all across the world, and so he had to learn how to pronounce some Chinese words for Sheng and some Dutch words for Sinterklaas, and let's see, we've got Ded Moroz, who is the Russian Santa, and his granddaughter Snegurka, and there's so many fun things and lots of fun words to try to pronounce. So what we discovered, what we were able to find, according to our research, was pronouncing this kind of like cake, like kahk, but and further back in your throat, right? Kahk. So Andrew is here. He's going to help me pronounce this. So why don't you pop on and say hi real quick.
Hello.
This is my husband, Andrew. He's the audiobook narrator. So how do you pronounce this?
Kahk.
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 Kahk. Yeah. Should be able to do that better, because I did go to German kindergarten, like in Germany, and so I should be able to do the sound better, but I'm not very good at it. So there you go. Baba Noel's Egyptian Kahk. Kahk. Yes. And agamea is the name of the filling on the inside. So all right.
Best part.
It is the best part. You could eat it by the spoonful. It's so good. All right. So because this recipe requires a resting time of an hour because there's yeast in it, I went ahead and prepped the dough ahead of time. So let me go ahead and read you that. Like I said, the full recipe can be found on my website. So for the dough, it is 1 tablespoon yeast. Thank you. I had him on standby to help me pronounce that. So So the Kahk dough is 1 tablespoon yeast, 1 tablespoon sugar, 1/3 of a cup warm milk. And actually, I'm going to walk you through this as I walk through the steps. So the first thing I did was I got out the yeast and you let it come to room temperature. And then I did take some pictures of it so I could show you guys. So you have the warm milk. You got to warm it up. I just warm it up in the microwave. You do 50% heat, and you do it for a very short time. And you don't want it hot. You don't want it burning hot because you will kill the yeast if the milk or the water or whatever you put yeast into. If it's too hot, it will kill it. And then it won't be nice and foamy. So you warm up the milk, and then I always put the sugar in first, and then the yeast, and then I mix it up. I don't think it really matters, but you want it all combined and mixed together. So don't let the yeast it'll like float on the top of the milk, and you don't want to let it do that. You want to mix it all in there. Yeast and sugar love each other very, very much. And when they have their special hug, they make a beautiful foam on top that then comes to life in your bread. So the first thing you're going to do is dissolve the sugar and yeast in the warm milk, and then you're going to set that to the side. And what you're looking for is for it to get a foam on top like this. So see how it almost looks like bread, right? But just the way it is. And then, so like from the side here, you can see. So this started as 1/3 of a cup. Yeah, 1/3 of a cup of warm milk, which is way down here. And you can see how high the foam rose above it. So definitely make sure that you have it in a big enough cup, right? Because it'll get nice and active if you have a good yeast. So, which I was actually worried about my yeast because this is kind of an older yeast that I've had for a while. But it was definitely still active. So then you set that to the side, and then you're going to melt the butter. So it's 1 1/4 cups butter. So it's quite a bit of butter. So if you're doing it by sticks, it's 2 full sticks and then half of a stick for 1 1/4 cups of butter. And again, I just melt that in my microwave. It's super easy, but you definitely want it in the recipe. I specifically say it needs to be bubbling until it's bubbling. So again, be very careful doing it in the microwave. You want to do it at like 50% heat, pull it out because then it'll start exploding inside of your microwave. So be careful. But you do want it bubbling. You want it quite warm. So then in a heat resistant bowl, which to me is something like this, right? So it's okay if hot stuff gets poured into there, right? It just means don't put it in a plastic bowl, right? You can't mix it in a plastic bowl. It is about this size, so not too small because it is going to make a full dough once you mix it all together. So grab that bowl and you're going to mix the flour and the cinnamon. And that is 3 cups of flour and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. I'll be honest, when I measure cinnamon, I never measure it with a teaspoon. I just pour it on until it looks like enough cinnamon because I love the flavor of cinnamon. So when you see my dough, which I can go ahead and show that to you, when you see it, you see how brown it is? It means that I put in a heck of a lot more cinnamon than just 1/4 teaspoon or 1/2 teaspoon. But they taste really, really good. I did a test bake of a couple of them just to make sure that this batch was going to work, and it's very good. So what I ended up doing was basically kind of pouring cinnamon until it covered the top of my flour. That's how much cinnamon I put in. So it was quite a bit, but I like cinnamon. So do it to your taste. Any herbs like that, or spices like that are, it's usually not, you don't have to be specific. It's just put it in until it tastes right. So, yeah. Okay. So then so I mixed all of that together. So the first thing is I'm stirring it. So I take a fork, right, and kind of whisk it together to mix the flour and the cinnamon together. Let me see if I showed that. I don't think I did. I don't think I took a picture of that part. It's just mixing it together. It's dry, right? So then you make a well in the center of it. So you've got this flour in your bowl and there's a well in the middle of it. And that's where you're going to pour your butter. So if you've ever watched a baking show where they're making their own pasta, that's how they do it. When I make muffins, that's how I do it. You just take the dry ingredients and you mix the wet ingredients, you mix the dry ingredients, and then you put the dry ingredients in a bowl, make a well in the center, and pour the wet in, and then mix it together. So that's what you're doing. And what you end up getting is kind of a crumbly looking mix, right? It's not fully incorporated. It's just kind of a wet, crumbly, which sounds like an oxymoron, right? It sounds like it doesn't go together, but it is, a little bit wet, a little bit crumbly at the same time. So you're stirring it until it is completely mixed, and then you let it cool down. Now, in my recipe, I'd put down, let it cool like 10 to 15 minutes. Just cool it until it's, you can touch it. It's not, depends on how hot your butter got. If your butter is really, really hot, then you need to let it cool down. If it's not really hot, if it's kind of just come to room temperature very quickly, depending on your day, then it's not. It wasn't a full 15 minutes for me. It was less than 10 before it was cool enough that I could touch it. So then I made sure that I could touch it, and it was cool enough before I added the milk mixture. So that's when I went and got the milk mixture and saw how much foam was on it, and I was like, excellent, this is great. The yeast is definitely alive. So then you add the milk mixture in, and then you combine it until it becomes a dough. So you can start with a spoon, but then it's kind of like making your own pie crust dough. I strongly recommend that you get your fingers in there so you can feel it, because it needs to come together until it looks like that, which I don't even really need to show you that because I still have that. So it still looks like this. So this is after an hour of resting, because you're going to mix it. It's going to kind of look like that. And then, and make sure it's all like it is stuck together. Like I can pick the whole thing up, right, and put it back down. So it's not sticking to the sides of my bowl at all. So you do all that. It becomes a dough, and then you let it sit for 1 hour. It does not rise. It has a tablespoon of yeast in it, but it does not rise like bread dough, right? When I put a tablespoon of yeast into bread dough, it gets like it's gonna fill this bowl, right? That is not what happens with this. I'm actually not really sure what the yeast is doing in there, but it makes for a very nice, like not bready, but kind of a cakey cookie. So it's not like a sugar cookie. It's more like, they actually remind me quite a bit of snowball cookies, which have the walnuts in them. It's just walnuts and butter. This is pistachios and butter. So it's very similar, but with the cinnamon. Oh man. Yeah, so this still smells, I mean, even after an hour, it smells so cinnamony, and like I actually wonder about like adding maybe some cloves or allspice or something and making it even more of like a gingerbread kind of mix. But the traditional recipe calls for just cinnamon. So it smells really, really good in here right now. This smells actually as strong as that tea candle that I put in the box. So that tells you how strong of a flavor of cinnamon I ended up putting into this. I love the smell of cinnamon. So it smells fantastic. So I put a towel, covered that, set it on the edge of my oven, and let that rest for an hour. So while I was doing that, while the dough sat, I prepared the agamea filling. So like Baba Noël says, this is my favorite part because it tastes so good. So what you end up doing, so this I also prepared because it needed to sit. I wanted to make sure that the filling was going to turn out okay, and mine actually turned out really runny. So I had to put it in the fridge in order to make it thicker. So now it's not, it's sliding very, very gently. Earlier it was, if I turned it like this, it would have like pooled in pools of butter. Now it's gotten a lot thicker. So it's more like where I want it. So note to self, if you make this and it's not coming together, it's not getting thick like you want it, put it in the fridge for a little while. While you wait, you can leave the dough. The dough will not go bad sitting there. I wouldn't let it sit there for too long, not for, not half a day. But it can sit there for a little, for an extra even hour if you need, in order to cool this down until it's a thicker like this. So to make the agamea, you make a roux. You melt the butter in the pan, and this time it's just a little bit of butter. It's only 3 tablespoons of butter. So you melt the butter in the pan, and then you whisk the flour into it. So if you've never made a roux before, I know it sounds really, really scary, but it's actually really simple. And it's a great base for a lot of things. Like when I make homemade mac and cheese, if you make my chicken pot pie recipe that I have on my website, which is Nane's Chicken Pot Pie. If you don't want to use the quick and dirty way of using a can of Campbell's soup to make the base, you can actually make a roux, and it's very simple. So it's so simple that once you start doing it, you'll be like, oh, I don't need to buy cream of whatever to throw in my stuff. Though I'll admit I still do that every once in a while. So they are great quick bases for things. So Okay, so for this one, you're going to melt the butter. So don't use cream of anything for this though, because this is a wonderful cookie. So you're going to melt the butter in the pan. You whisk the flour into the pan until it looks creamy. So it combines into this creamy thing, and you take it off the heat. Be sure to take it off the heat because you don't want it to burn or like bake. You melt the butter and then whisk in the flour until it looks nice and creamy. If you look up a roux, you will see how it should look. So then you pull it off the heat and you pour in your cup of honey. So I buy honey by the gross because we go through honey quite a bit. I like to buy local honey. You can buy if you buy local honey, it's gonna have natural things in it that actually help a lot with health things. They can help with allergies and things like that because it means that the bees are collecting pollen from local flowers. So that pollen that is making you not feel good in spring or whenever, the bees are collecting the pollen from those flowers and putting it into their honey. So if you eat honey that has that in it, it will actually help you with during allergy season. So we keep honey on hand for a lot of things because we put it in our tea, we put it, on bagels, on everything. So we keep honey on hand in cups worth quite easily. If you don't, make sure that you have at least a cup's worth of honey available to you because you're gonna want that strong honey flavor for this one. So let's see. So you pour the honey in and you mix it in with the roux, and it'll start coming together, but not getting really thick yet. So you put it back on the heat, and then you mix in your pistachios and your sesame seeds. So sesame seeds is another thing that we don't always keep it on hand, but we have lately because there's just been a lot of recipes lately that we've wanted to add them to. They're pretty easy to find. They are an optional ingredient. You don't have to have them in this recipe. If you don't have sesame seeds, don't sweat it. It's okay. Just don't worry about it. They add something to it. They're traditionally made with sesame seeds. So if you are someone who does naturally cook with sesame seeds a lot, then you'll have some. But if you don't, it's okay. For the pistachios, note to self, buy shelled pistachios. So all we had was the kind in the shells still. So Andrew and I stood here and cracked the shells off of pistachios for a while because you need a cup's worth. So we actually started doing a few more because I wasn't sure if I was going to make another batch or not. But this one turned out great. So so you need to remove the shells. So if you buy pistachios that have the shells on them, I didn't include that in the recipe. I didn't specify that, but hopefully you know that you should not eat the shells of a pistachio. So take the shells off of them, make sure that they are shelled. I realized I didn't even put that on the back or in the list or anything. So Kahk is traditionally made with walnuts. But I did find a recipe or two out there that did include pistachios. So I knew it would be okay for me to swap them out for pistachios because that became part of the line of the book. I had Sam talking to them and I was like, you know what? I wonder if I could make this with pistachios because I prefer pistachios over walnuts. I like snowball cookies, which have walnuts in them, but that's one of the few things that I like with walnuts. Even fudge, like I would rather have like pecans than walnuts. I know, crazy. So and I love pistachios. I love pistachio muffins. If you've never made muffins with pistachios, you're missing out. They're amazing. In fact, that might be a recipe I should share in future. I'll have to figure out if Mrs. Curry can get pistachios in Spokane in 1901, and then I'll let you know. I'll be sharing that recipe. If not, maybe I'll just have somebody at the North Pole whip it up. So you do need a cup of pistachios. It makes these taste almost more reminiscent of like baklava. So if you've ever had baklava, you're going to love these cookies because that's kind of what the flavor ends up being like with the pistachio and honey and the cinnamon. So like I said, if you don't want the sesame seeds, throw those out, but you definitely want the pistachios or some kind of nut in there because you can't just put the honey into the middle. You need some kind of nut to carry it because what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up with these cookies with like this nut honey baked into it. So the other thing I wanted to specify was I didn't crush the pistachios. They are whole pistachios that are in my cookie. You are welcome to chop them up and do chopped pistachios instead if you would prefer that, if you don't like a big old bite of pistachio. I like them whole like this, and it saved me a step. I didn't have to crush them up, but you absolutely could if you would prefer. So try it. Let me know in the comments if you try that over on my website, or DM me, or post a picture of them on social media so that I can see them, and tag me in it, please. Let me know if you bake these according to the recipe in the back of my book or on one of these cards, because I'd love to see how they turn out for you. Hopefully my recipe is clear, and if not, that you found this video to help walk you through it. So I'm sorry that I'm not really like doing some of the things actively, because I looked at the recipe again and I was like, oh, that's right, this one takes an hour here, and then while it basically takes an hour to make the agamea, because you want it to sit, like I said, and get really thick, because otherwise it doesn't really work when you put it into the cookie. So once I realized that, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna be able to do this like live. I'm gonna have to prep some of it and just kind of walk you through it. So here we are now. So thank you for joining me. Don't worry, you are going to get to watch some of it, because now we're going to do the part where we put it together. So I've got my oven is preheating at 350. And then I've got my pans. So I use a Silpat, which is just a reusable covering for your pans. Highly recommend investing in these, you guys. These are one of the best things to have in your kitchen, is a Silpat, and they come in a variety of sizes. Usually you can buy them in packs of like 2 big ones and 1 small one, and that's what I have. They save you so much in cleaning. You don't have to buy parchment paper to cover your pans. You don't have to spray your pans. Everything goes on it and comes off of it really easily, especially when baking these cookies. So these cookies, if you don't seal them, absolutely, and you end up with some honey that drizzles out the edges, it comes off really easily off of the Silpat, I have discovered. So again, highly recommend, because then it came right off and I was able to clean it up really easily. So again, like, I've had some learning curves as we do with baking. So though I loved the last one that we did, somebody in the comment string called it the Great Bookish Bake Off, and I loved that. So here we are again with a Great Bookish Bake Off. Though this time I am not joined by 2 fellow bakers. But if you want to check that one out, that one was aired this last Sunday. And I got to be joined by Kay's Hidden Shelf and Andrew's Wizardly Reads. And we all shared different sugar cookie recipes from different places. And so then we were able to compare all the different recipes. And again, those are all available on my website. So that was really fun. Definitely check that out if you're enjoying these videos. And like I said, I have a whole playlist of different ones. So, all right, so let's do the final step and bake some of these cookies. So, dropped my recipe card, put that there. Okay, so always wash your hands before you do this. And then filling these cookies is not too hard. Like I said, in the recipe, what the directions that I actually said was make the filling into small balls. And if it has come together enough, you might be able to do that. I'm honestly not going to risk it with this one, because it's dripping again now that it's gotten more at room temperature. It's just a little bit more liquidy. And that's okay. It's still going to work. Trust me. So you get to learn along the way with me here. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a small spoon to fill them, and that should work out great. So, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to pinch off some of the dough. And it's a little bit crumbly as it comes off, okay? But then you're just going to press it together. I mean, it's butter and flour. So as soon as the oils of your hand get in there, it comes together very nicely, right? So then you're going to press it down, almost like a thumbprint cookie, right? So it's nice and flat. Get it as flat as you can. And mine is cracking a little bit, probably because I left it sitting out for a while. And then you're going to get a good spoonful of filling. So about that much, right? And then I'm going to take it off the spoon. I'm trying to do this while showing you. It's hard. So I scrape it off of the spoon and put it right in the center. So you can see how goopy this is. This would not have worked making it into balls. It would have been an absolute mess. But a tasty mess, because this is the best part, is that since I don't have to share these cookies, I can lick my fingers while I do it. All right, so then you're going to bring the dough up around the filling. So you see how it's coming out the edge there, right? So that's where I really want to pinch it together so that it doesn't leak all over my silpat. But like I said, it comes off really easily. All right, so I made it closed, right? And then I'm just going to roll it in my palm. Is that like a tablespoon or bigger? So about palm-sized ball of dough is quite a bit. And then this is just a normal like teaspoon. It's not a big tablespoon. It's a little teaspoon. It's like a normal sized eating spoon. And I barely filled that, like halfway, right? Play around with it until it fits. You want it to fit inside of the ball, but not so much that it's leaking out the edges. So, and like I said, it's okay if it gets all over your fingers because then you get to lick them and they're delicious. So, so I do not have a Kahk, like the actual wooden mold. It's something I would love for Christmas. So what I did before, so normally I would just go for it with this. But let me show you what a traditional one looks like, because you can order these. So that's what it looks like. It's a nice wooden press. I have some presses somewhere, and I was unable to find them before this. I have like a big flat pan that I could have used, but yeah. But what I found is it is just as easy to just use a fork. So if you've ever made, let's see, if you've ever made like peanut butter cookies, right? Where you just press it down. So there's the thing, right? So then I just press it down on one side and then the other, and it's going to make like a nice little design on the top. Doesn't look very pretty from there. Yeah, there you go. So kind of a pressed cookie like that. So here's the thing is when, after they bake and after you pull them out, you're going to cover them in powdered sugar. Like you sprinkle powdered sugar all over the top. So I kept watching these videos and watching all of these and looking up all these different recipes of Kahk. And they talk about how beautiful the press is and how wonderful the design is. And it really is. It's really gorgeous if you can find one and make them traditionally. But then you cover it with powdered sugar and you can't see the design anymore. So in the end, I was like, so do I really need a mold? No, I'm not going to buy one. Someday I will come across one in a thrift store probably, and it'll be a great find, and I'll have this fantastic mold, right? Because it's definitely something they would have used in the 19th century. I'm sure they'll be able to find it. So, hi, Mike. Merry Christmas. Thanks for coming on. So in the meantime, just use a fork, right? Because when I'm done, you're going to see we're just going to put powdered sugar over the top, and it does need some powdered sugar because if you look at the recipe, there is no sugar in this other than the 1 tablespoon of sugar that I added with the yeast to bring the yeast to life. Other than that, there's just the 1 cup of honey. So it is very naturally sugared, right? It's very naturally sweet. So in that way, in fact, there's butter. So if you can't do butter, but otherwise there's no eggs in it, there is milk in it. So never mind. I was going to say it's almost vegan, but no, it's not. So, but it is naturally sugared with the honey. So that's kind of nice. It's like a low sugar thing. It's one of those few things that's low sugar at Christmas time. But then you put powdered sugar on the outside if you want it sweeter. So again, one of the things I would recommend is making the cookie and then trying it before you add powdered sugar to it, because it might be that you don't want the powdered sugar on it, that you like the kind of the less sweetness of it. They're like snowball cookies in that way. So yeah, so here you go. Thanks, Mike. Great British Baking Show is over, so I'm counting on me, huh? All right, thanks. hopefully you can follow along here. So we're actually at the last part of it now. So I am going to take my ring off. Sorry, Andrew, I'll put it back on immediately. But we are going to make a bunch of these, and I don't want to get stuff on my ring. So I want to make a bunch of these, then I'm pop them in the oven. They take about 15 minutes to cook, so you will get to be here while I live cook these. So once again, I'm gathering the dough, and I'm going to press it down. And this one, I ended up with a little bit less dough. It's not quite as wide as my palm, so I'm going to put a little bit less of the filling in. I just realized I just did that over the pan instead of showing you guys, sorry. But then I'm gonna roll them up. So while I'm doing that, yes, cooking and baking in rings is no fun, absolutely. So whenever we make like bread and things like that and you have to knead the dough, I always take my ring off because I don't want to clean it. Andrew has a past of working at a jewelry store, and so he knows how terrible it is to clean rings that are covered in lotion and dough and all sorts of things. So, all right, so I'm just going to keep making these. So while I'm doing that, I had a question for you guys. What is your must-make recipe every Christmas? So what is something that you're like, okay, I have to make that? For me, it's sugar cookies. I always start with sugar cookies because then we end up decorating them with the kids. So we have 2 kids. And we homeschool, and so we end up baking a lot as part of homeschool. It's chemistry. So the beauty of homeschool. So we always make sugar cookies, and if you want a recipe for that, you can check out the other one. The other bake-along that we did on Sunday, where we made our traditional recipe, and our traditional recipe comes from Andrew's side of the family. His mom had a recipe for incredible sugar cookies that have cream cheese in them, so they're really chewy and wonderful. Andrew's family also has an amazing recipe for fudge. Yes, oh, fudge. It is, the way Andrew describes the fudge is it's a kind of fudge that you can actually eat a whole bunch of it and not feel like, oh my gosh, I just ate a whole bunch of fudge, right? It's never too much. It's, yeah, you could just eat cakes of it. It's very dangerous fudge. It's very light, and it turns out every time when we make it. But we have not tried it since we moved here. So we'll be making our fudge for the first time maybe we did make it last year. I don't remember. So for now, I'm just rolling these, and then I'm going to press them with the fork when I'm done rolling them. So, but yeah, so we always make fudge. When I was growing up, we always made sugared pecans. But I have not tried making that because for me, that never turns out. They never turn out the way I want them to. But growing up, my mom would always make sugared pecans. Yeah. So if you make this and you decide to just eat spoonfuls of the agamea, like I said, no judgment here. That sounds amazing to me. It's like eating the best part of baklava because it's basically just the filling for baklava, right? Is what this is. So without the layered, I'm blanking on it, the pastry that you layer for that. So Christmas morning quiche. Yes, we always make quiche on Christmas morning. That's always been a tradition for us. Though we have had a variety of different kinds of quiches. We've done it with spinach and sun-dried tomato, onion. Yeah, lots of different things. And then we usually use like Swiss cheese. I like that little bit sharper flavor. All right, I end up with too much filling here. As you can see, this is very messy. So it's a very messy recipe. Wear your apron. but it is worth it. Trust me. So if you're looking for something messy to do with the kids, this is a great one to make with them, right? Because they get all sticky. But if being messy with your kids really drives you up a wall, don't make this one. Make this one on your own, and then let them try it when they wake up in the next morning, because it is quite messy. Phyllo dough. Thank you, Mike. That's exactly the word I was looking for. Yeah, which we've made our own baklava too. We like baklava. It's good. Though we had one recipe that it, for some reason, whatever was in it, I think it had like a squeeze of lemon juice in it was added in. And so we tried that, and it made it taste like mock apple pie. It was really weird. And the only thing I can think, because the only thing that was different for that recipe was adding a squeeze of lemon juice in with the agamea, basically, with the honey and that part. So this filling tastes more like what I want my baklava to taste like. Is honey and pistachio. So and then I heard cinnamon coffee. Yes, cinnamon coffee cake. So growing up, yep, we made bear bread or monkey bread, which is where you take like Pillsbury dough, in a can, and you pop it out. So it's a really easy thing to make. I'm always looking for easy things to make with my kids, right? So it's something I've made with my kids since they were little, because from the age of 2, as soon as they can stand up, they can help make this, because you just take Pillsbury dough or canned dough, not brand name, whatever. And you cut it into, so they usually come in rounds like that, right? You cut it into 4s at least. So that way you have a bunch of small pieces. And then you dip each of those pieces in butter and then in cinnamon sugar. And then you throw them into a pan. And we have a Christmas tree shaped pan that we have had since my kids were little. And that is what we traditionally make our monkey bread in. And so we make that every morning, because they're not huge fans of quiche. They've learned to like it. They like quiche now. But when they were little, they didn't really care for quiche. But monkey bread, everybody loves. So we would have that every morning. So for us, our tradition was always to, let's see. So Christmas Eve, we would open one present, and it was always new PJs. So you knew what it was, but it was still fun. You got to open your new PJs, one present on Christmas Eve. And so we would open that, and then we would hang our stockings and put out our cookies for Santa, the glass of milk. And then my dad would read 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. And we have a bunch of funny things that we add in there, because my mom's family is hilarious. And so we have a bunch of traditional things that we would add in. Like when you read the line, and jumped out of bed and threw up the sash, and we'd all go, bleh. He's throwing up the sash. So funny. So things like that. And I fully intend to incorporate a lot of those things into my Sam books. So that particular joke didn't make it in there this time, but I wasn't writing Knives Out, so didn't have throw up everywhere. So maybe in the next one. So let's see. So then we read the Nativity Christmas story. So we read Luke 2, and we read that, and then we say a prayer, and then we go to bed. And this was all done by normal bedtime. So we were in bed by, maybe because it was Christmas Eve, we'd be up a little bit late, so it'd be like 9 o'clock. But we really wanted to get to bed early. But then I would lie there and not be able to sleep all night. I always have a hard time sleeping on Christmas Eve. In fact, one of my distinct memories is waking up in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve, and I heard somebody in the computer room, so I went to see who was in there. And it was my dad, and he was playing solitaire on on the computer. And this is in the 90s. So this is like the classic Hoyle solitaire, right? Like the only game that was available. You had like solitaire and Minesweeper were the only things that came on your computer, right? Free games when you bought the computer. So I went in there and I watched him play solitaire until late. It's just one of those memories that I always come up to with Christmas. And in fact, that memory kind of made it into my book because I've got the reindeer playing reindeer games, which turns out to be playing poker. So it wasn't solitaire, but it was poker, which is a slight reference to that memory. So it's always fun as an author to incorporate things that are true to life, that are inspirational from real things that have happened. So I am doing a terrible job of filling these, by the way, guys. I keep putting more filling in than I can actually fit in how much dough I've got. So next time, I think what I'll do, hopefully my dough next time will be a little bit more, it's very sticky this time. Next time, hopefully it'll be a little bit drier so I could press it flatter, thinner. What I'm ending up with is kind of a thicker one. All right, I'm going to do 3 more and then I'll put them in the oven. And then I can change my prompt there for my question. So let's see. So what are some other recipes that we make every year? We always make fudge. We have a recipe for peppermint cookies. We make these chocolate peppermint cookies. So it's basically like a brownie chocolate cookie. And then you put in Andes mints. So those wonderful chocolate mint. Those chocolate mints. So to this day, my favorite thing is like York peppermint patties or junior mints, which I love at this time of year. They have the junior mints with the red and green on the inside. I don't know why that brings me so much joy, but it does. So I love peppermint flavored things. But specifically that kind of peppermint, like that York peppermint patty flavor. I love that. Well, these chocolate mint cookies have that kind of flavor. It's that kind of cool mint kind of thing. So it's wonderful. And we always make those. And then like Andrew says, lefse. We always make lefse every year. And that comes from Andrew's family. I had never heard of lefse growing up. Is it Norwegian or Swedish? Norwegian. It is a Norwegian tradition. It is basically a potato pancake. So you mix potato and flour and salt, and that's about it. Though someday I will share his mom's recipe for lefse, because maybe next year we'll do that. Because she has a secret ingredient that makes them amazing. They're so good. It's the best lefse you'll ever have. That definitely needs to happen in the next book. So I will include some sort of mention with lefse, so that way we can make it together. So it's cooked like a tortilla. So it's more like, not like a pancake. It's more like a potato tortilla. Because then you cook it in a pan one at a time. So it's a little bit time consuming, but so worth it because they're very thin. They're almost like crepes. And they're just this wonderful, easy bread roll up. So then you traditionally just eat them with just butter. You just melt butter and put it on the inside and wrap it around the butter, and they're wonderful. But I have also known people who have eaten them with honey or jam on the inside as well. So, and by I've known people, I mean there are actually people in Andrew's family who do eat them like that way, even though it's taboo. We should never eat them that way. It should be just butter. Just like in my mom's family, the rules of how you eat grits, right? You only eat grits with butter and salt, maybe some cheese on top and bacon, a little bit of bacon if you're feeling fancy. Feeling fancy or feeling hungry, but never cinnamon sugar or anything sweet, because that is reserved for porridge and oatmeal. You do not put that on grits. So, to each his own. So I was very happy when I discovered that pistachios, that I would not be kicked out of, the chats on the baking stuff, when I was thinking, I wonder if I can replace walnuts with pistachios in the kahk, because that sounds more appetizing to me. So when I was able to actually find some recipes where they did that, I was like, okay, that's good. So this is a combination of different recipes that I found from different Egyptian families who make kahk every year. So this is not a recipe that I made up. It does come from traditions. So yeah, so that was fun doing the research for that as well. All right, I'm gonna rinse my hands real quick, and then we're gonna press these down and put them in the oven. And before I do that, how about, what is your must-watch Christmas movie? What's the Christmas movie that you're like, okay, it is not Christmas until I get to watch this movie? For me, Christmas begins by watching the Charlie Brown Christmas movie. So I usually end up watching that Thanksgiving Eve, the night of Thanksgiving, because then the next day is when we pull out all of our Christmas decorations. Day after Christmas, the tree goes up, all the decorations come out. All right, so what I'm doing is actually just kind of doing a smashed version of these. I want to get them in the oven quickly. So we'll have a few pretty ones and a few not so pretty ones, but they're still going to taste amazing. So this is not the British baking show, so it's okay if it's not perfect. It just have to taste good. Yum. Okay, let me give you a close-up of this agamayo. It's amazing. So it is literally a spoonful of pistachio, sesame seeds, and honey. I mean, yeah. Yum. All right. Ribbon cookies. Okay, tell me what a ribbon cookie is, Angelique. I haven't heard of those. And then Mike, yep, the animated Grinch, yep. The original animated one, the 30-minute short with the Boris Karloff? No, yeah. Who's the voice of the Grinch? Absolutely. Though I really like the CGI version, the new one with Benedict Cumberbatch as the Grinch. It was actually really good. That one I like. Andrew likes the Jim Carrey one with the live action. And that one has a place, but for me, it's too dark. It is the new CGI one. It still captures that light brightness of the original animated one, while still adding to the story. Whereas the Jim Carrey one just felt very dark to me. Even the lighting of it is very dark. But some people like Die Hard as a Christmas movie. So, I can say that because that's my parents there. So actually, since there's only a few of you guys here live, I don't know who's going to watch this later, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I've started working on book 2 of Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman. So the sequel is going to be called Murder on the North Pole Express. So an homage to Murder on the Orient Express. I'll tell you right now, the answer will not be the same as the Orient Express because everybody knows the answer to that now. So it will be something different. But what made me just think of that is because I've decided to open it with a quote from Die Hard. So this one opens with a quote from A Christmas Carol. It opens with yep, and let me find the prologue. Yeah, I was dead to begin with is the opening line of this one. I was dead to begin with, because the opening of A Christmas Carol is the Marleys were dead to begin with. And if you don't know that they are dead, then what follows will not be so so fascinating, so inconceivable, right? So marvelous and wonderful. And so that's what I wanted to start this one with was, I was dead to begin with. Sam only gets 12 days to live. And so he is a fascinating character. Like he mentions at one point, I was born yesterday. So, which that idea came from, we were watching Bluey. Any Bluey fans out there? And there's an episode where Dad, so the kids are asking him, what does it mean to say, well, I wasn't born yesterday, right? And they say, okay, well, why don't you pretend that you were born yesterday? And so he does, and it's this beautiful, as so many Bluey episodes are, this beautiful, thought-provoking episode about what that would be like, right? That everything is new. And I loved that idea, and that definitely came into the writing of this one with Sam. I wanted to capture that idea. So I just realized I didn't set a timer. So these do cook at 350 for 15 minutes, and that's Fahrenheit. So I'm going to set it for 10, and I'll check on them. When I cooked them last time, they did take the full 15 minutes. In fact, a little bit longer than that, more like 16 minutes. So, but yeah, so the opening line for this one is going to be a quote from Die Hard. So if you want to guess what line from Die Hard is the opening line, I won't tell you what it is. I'll save that for later. But you're welcome to guess it. So, I do love that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It absolutely is. So, though to me, a Christmas movie means it's something like encouraging and uplifting, and it doesn't have to be a Hallmark film. I like Hallmark films. There is a place for them and a time for them when I just want something cozy and comforting. But there's also a time when that gets really irritating. It's very repetitive. But I like some variety in that. I also love watching Christmas specials. I know a lot of people will talk about like the Doctor Who Christmas specials. Those in the past have been wonderful. But actually my go-to Christmas specials are the Murdoch Mystery Christmas specials, which if you haven't discovered Murdoch Mysteries, they are fantastic. They are a great comparison to my books. They capture a lot of the things that I really wanted to capture in my books. I had watched Murdoch Mysteries before I wrote my books, and so when I had an agent, she's the one who was like, "Oh, these are very much like that." I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess they are." I guess I was very much influenced by them. So she helped me make that comp. Yeah, the Murdoch Mystery Christmas specials are really well written. Yes, thank you, Alethea. Oh, good. I'm glad that you're enjoying the audiobook. So yeah, thank you for saying that. And Angelique, It's a Wonderful Life. That is absolutely one of my favorite Christmas movies. That's another one where if you really think about it, it's like Christmas for this much of the film, and then there's this much of the film, right, on the other side of it. But I love It's a Wonderful Life. It makes me cry every time. I just have to see the very last scene where they're in front of the tree and holding Zuzu. And and them all coming in and giving him money. I mean, just thinking about it just makes me want to cry. So I absolutely love It's a Wonderful Life. And I love that the premise is they have to understand his entire life in order to understand how powerful this moment is, right? That moment would not be powerful if you haven't seen the entire movie, if you're not familiar with the whole story, which is similar to me for A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol is very powerful at the end, his complete change. But it's powerful because you now know his entire life leading up to it. So, it's just one of those, I don't know. It's amazing how they did that. Scrooge. Yes. So Scrooge, do you mean, so which version of A Christmas Carol? Do you mean Scrooge? I think, is that the name of the version with Patrick Stewart, Andrew?
Scrooge is the one
Oh, Bill Murray? No, that was called Scrooged, I thought, with a D on the end. Yeah. Yeah. What about, there's one that's just called Scrooge. Oh, and then there's the Christmas Carol. There's the musical, which has that song that my mom's always singing about. It's basically "I'm so happy you're dead." It's about and Cratchit sings it after discovering that Scrooge has died. So in the third turn. Which, if you're interested in reading A Christmas Carol, if you've never read the book, so not seen it, but read the book, you can listen to Andrew do an audiobook reading of it on my channel. Let's see if I still have the banner for that. I do. So there you go. You can go check him out. He read it live when was that? It was the first of December. So if you've never read it, I highly recommend watching him read it because he got all dressed up as Scrooge and read it live. So it was fantastic, and it's one of those books that I end up reading it every year for one reason or another. But every year I'm reminded how close some of the versions of the movies. So the version with Patrick Stewart is like line for line the book. It's only missing some of the stuff, some of the exposition right in between. So it does miss some of the witty things that I caught this time when Andrew was reading it. I was like, man, that's really witty. It's very P.G. Wodehouse in its humor, and very Dickens. If you read, like, my favorite Dickens is A Tale of Two Cities, which is a wonderful drama, an amazing book, incredible redemption. Like yeah, it's a great story. And it's another one with lines that will just jump out at you, and you're just like, oh my gosh, wow. Yeah, and yeah, Alastair Sims, 1951, that version. Okay. Of Scrooge. All right. I'm trying to remember if I've seen that one recently. We usually end up rewatching the Muppets Christmas Carol. So that's my other favorite version. So the Patrick Stewart version is Andrew's favorite. My personal favorite is the Muppets version, which I also think has a lot of lines straight out of the book. When he was reading it live, my kids and I were noticing all of the lines that were like, oh yeah, I remember that being in Muppets Christmas Carol. Not least of which being the very first line, which Gonzo says, which is "the Marleys were dead to begin with," and Rizzo makes a comment about, "Ooh, creepy." Yeah, I love the relationship between Gonzo and Rizzo in that film. Just sets up for like perfection. It's amazing. It was a wonderful dynamic duo. So yeah. Yeah, so let's see. Another question I had was, what is your favorite Christmas carol? I love listening to Christmas carols. For my book, I wanted to incorporate a lot of lines from Christmas carols. So I have a lot of things like someone says, "Oh, he struck the harp and joined the chorus," right, to talk about somebody who's dead. And so I loved doing that. When Sam, who's a snowman, he gets punched through with something, something goes through him and leaves a hole in him. And so they can go, "Oh, holy night." That kind of thing. I loved making up those puns and coming up with those. And so now this year, as I'm listening to Christmas carols, I keep coming across lines. I'll listen to a carol and go, "Oh, there's a line. There's something I can twist." And I have to be careful because I can only use public domain Christmas carols. So those ones that have been around so long that it's okay if I use the absolute line from it. Some of the newer ones I can use, but I have to use them in a parody way, right? I have to use them in a pun. So it has to be slightly twisted from the original. So that way I'm not, plagiarizing. No plagiarism here. So that's really fun, like to listen to something and go, okay, well, how can I incorporate that in there? So it'll be fun to see what pops up in the next book as I start working on it. So one of the hardest things is most of the time I'm listening to Christmas carols in the car. And so I don't have like a way to write down notes as I'm doing it. And so I keep thinking, oh, I got to bring that CD in and listen to it again. Because yes, I still listen to CDs. I don't just listen to Spotify. Some of my favorite Christmas albums are still on CD. So I've got like a Barlow Girl is one of my favorite collections. They have an amazing Yes, yeah, I think 100 years plus is open domain. Yeah, that's the general rule. There's some other rules. Sometimes it's like 75 years from the death of the author. So it depends and when it was published. And then yes, Disney, you have to be careful because if Disney has acquired the rights to it, they will fight you tooth and nail for a lot of things. They are very careful. I won't say their name again, just in case that calls in, the copyright checkers. But Disney likes to acquire things that are, that would be in the public domain. So Peter Pan, Winnie the Pooh, things like that should be in the public domain, but they are not because Disney owns them now. So, no thoughts here. But yeah, so it's fun though, because a lot of the traditional ones too are the ones that people redo over and over again, right? Because they are public domain, anybody can make them into music, right? They can't use the arrangements of new versions, but they can use the original versions. And so the same thing is true and that's why we end up with Christmas carols that everybody knows. And yes, everybody gets sick of them after the first 2 weeks, especially if you're working retail and listening to the same songs over and over again. But there's something comforting to me about listening to those same songs over and over again. So, O Come Emmanuel might come back. And yes, I know. Yeah, Winnie the Pooh is well, the original version of Winnie the Pooh is technically public domain. You just can't there's things like you can't have him in a red shirt because technically that's Disney. But it's fun to see when things come into public domain and people suddenly notice them. There'll be a wave of influence, right? When Wizard of Oz came into public domain, all of a sudden there were all these different twists and different versions of Wizard of Oz, right? So you end up with the Tin Man with Zooey Deschanel, which if you've never seen that version, it's one of my favorite versions of Wizard of Oz. It's like a 3-part like episodic thing. It's wonderful. It's always fun to see. And then you ended up with like all those like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and all those, right? There's some really fun things that you can do with public domain. So it's fun when you come across those. White Christmas. Love White Christmas. I love the song. I love the movie. It was a movie that had to grow on me though, to be honest. Okay, these are done. Oh man, it smells good. It smells like something. All right, so I'm going to be honest with you here and show you. You see how they spilled out? This is why a sill pad is so nice, though, because you see how they're like gooping around? They're not going to stick on there. It's going to come off really easily. So it's really nice to have the sill pad for these. So, all right, so I'm going to take these off. I didn't grow up watching the movie White Christmas. So that's why I think it had to grow on me. I wasn't as familiar with it. But then, so I was introduced to it as an adult. Now, I then introduced it to my daughter at a young age. She's 8. That one broke apart. And she loves it. So it's not a matter of age. It's not like, it's only for older people. As an adult watching it, it makes me sob. I am an Army brat, so I was raised in a military family, and so the whole thing with the general gets me every time. It means so much to me. I have known men like that who are just, it's wonderful. The songs are wonderful. Not all of them. Some of them are, but the dancing one, is it While We're Dancing? Is that what that one's called? I haven't watched it this year, so I need to watch it again so I can remember all of it. And then, of course, there's Holiday Inn, which is the other one with Bing Crosby, and he sings that song. And that's one I need to watch again, too, because I've only watched it once. I ended up with a lot of crumbs on the floor this time. So, all right, so we're going to let those cool a little bit, but we ended up with some perfect ones and some not so perfect ones. But like I said, I'm not picky. I am going to eat them no matter what they look like. So I'm going to let them cool a little bit, and then we'll sprinkle some powdered sugar on them. So here. See that? There you go. So you can see they're kind of bread-like, and I think that's from the yeast. Like I said, they're they're a cakier kind of cookie. Yeah, no, I need to let those sit a little bit, otherwise they're gonna fall apart as soon as I pick them up. So I do still have some dough, so I'm gonna make a few more while I'm standing here, waiting for those to cool. I love the song White Christmas. That's a great one. I love Joy to the World, O Come, Emmanuel, all those ones. I love the Christmas song, the chestnuts roasting on an open fire, that whole one. That one immediately evokes Christmas to me. And not just because the name is in the song, but because the things it's describing are just, that is Christmas to me. So there was a funny, which person was that? Was it? I think it's Francesca Battistelli did a song last year, the year before that, and it's called Christmas. What Christmas is to me, and it starts with things like mom going crazy because the turkey got burned, and saying thanks for some gift you'll return, and things like that. So it's all these like kind of not perfect ones. Perfect things, but then talking about how that's still Christmas, right? It's all of those things. It's the good and the bad coming together and reminding us that there is, amidst the darkness, a baby of light and hope was born into the world and brought that hope to us. And then that exists for the rest of the year, but we're just reminded of it at Christmas time. So have I ever had roasted chestnuts? I have not had roasted chestnuts. I don't think. I've had roasted, how you'll go to like the Ren Fair has like roasted, I think they're usually like almonds. So like sugared almonds or sugared pecans, that kind of thing. Excuse me. Losing my voice. Excuse me. So I've had like that kind of roasted nut, but I don't think that's the traditional roasted chestnuts. I feel like we tried to make them once and we didn't like them. They were nasty. We were like, why is this what they're always talking about in the thing? Though I recently got a book. Yeah, the only time I've seen people eat roast chestnuts in a Hallmark movie. Yeah. Sometimes they'll get them like on the corner. I feel like I've seen them in a couple, the older ones, the ones that are set in like the 19th century. Because definitely it's a Victorian tradition. Yeah, so Oh Holy Night. I love Oh Holy Night. That's a wonderful one. It's another one where I have a very distinct memory of someone singing that when I was a child, a friend of ours. So we worked at a camp that ministered to military families. And we had a friend who would come up every Christmas, and she wasn't that old. She was like 10. Because I remember, we were all young. I was 16 when we moved there. But I think this gal was like 10, and she went on to be like, she worked at Disney as a princess and that kind of thing. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous voice. But at this point, she was 10, and she sang "Oh Holy Night" perfectly. It was the best. Like, my memory of it was, she was probably 10 exactly. And she just got up there and suddenly started singing "Oh Holy Night," and it was perfect out of a 10-year-old. And it was just one of those voices like when you're watching, America's Got Talent, things like that, where you're like, oh my goodness, this 10-year-old is singing like a professional, just perfect operatic, incredible voice. Yeah, and it was one of those memories that I just always think of. That he thinks he would like fruitcake. Okay, well, we might have to make him fruitcake, and we'll see. So Alan's my son. We'll have to see what he thinks of fruitcake. It's one of those traditions. It's a very British tradition to make fruitcake. And to me, that was the funniest part of there was, which one was it? There was an Olaf spin-off short that, of course my kids watched because they love Frozen. and he was like collecting Christmas traditions from different places. And one of them is he goes in and he gets a fruit cake, and they're like, try it, eat it, and he eats it, and it comes right out the bottom. Oh, those things will go right through you. It's like, yeah, that's the fruit cake. And there's just a bunch of jokes with the fruit cake. So to me, fruit cake is not is not something that I enjoy. But a traditional British pudding. Andrew makes like a boiled chocolate pudding with an orange. You do it with an orange on the inside, so it's this orange chocolate thing. Oh, it's amazing. It's really, really good. So yeah, candied fruit, plum pudding. Yeah. Let's see. I think these are almost ready. Because people with that name that like fruitcake. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see if he if he likes it. We'll have to make him some. So, is it plum pudding that has the lighted thing? I've always wanted to. We did that once, to see what it was like to have like a lighted pudding that flambe. Yeah. So, all right. So I'm gonna choose one of these. This one turned out pretty good. So none of my design really carried through on these. I guess you can kind of see it. It's hard to see on the video, but it is pressed. So it has kind of a crisscross pattern across the top. So, but then this is what you do with it, is you put powdered sugar all over the top. So, yeah. Good thing I'm almost done here. So I just filled a bowl with powdered sugar, and I turned the cookie upside down, and then just put a little bit of powdered sugar on the top. So see, in the end, you can't see the design. So, it's falling apart because it's warm and gooey and wonderful. All right, so in the end, you can't see the design, so don't stress out about it too much. But it's still fun to come up with different things. So, all right, so since this one is falling apart, I'll go ahead and open it. So as you can see, there's not like the center, the honey cooks into the cookie, right? So you don't end up with like a chewy center or anything like that. It's like the honey bakes into it, and then you're left with these bites of pistachio. So it's like a bite of like this. It's not salty, because the salt is incorporated basically into the cookie, and so it's the closest thing I can say is it's like a snowball cookie if you've ever had one of those, Russian tea cake, that kind of cookie. Which is walnuts and butter and powdered sugar. So similar to that. Yeah. Yum. So there you go. Yeah. It is kind of like baklava. It's a little bit, it's a lot like baklava, actually. It's not as rich. It's almost like if you made these and then you poured more of that agamea over the top, then it would be more like baklava. Because baklava, by the time you're done with the phyllo dough, it just tastes like soaked. It's just this part, right? Because the phyllo dough is so thin. This is thicker, so it has more of a like a cinnamon cookie, very light cinnamon cookie. So even with all that cinnamon that I put on top, it's pretty it's still not as cinnamony as you probably would think it was. So anyway, so there you go. You're welcome, Angelique. Thank you for joining. And yeah, so again, you can find the recipe online on my website. Yeah. The best part is the smell and the taste, but the smell is so good. So wonderful. So thank you guys for joining me tonight live. I'm glad that this worked out so you guys could see all of these and just see these wonderful cookies. Like I said, I'd never heard of them. So Egyptian Kahk cookies, tradition for Egyptian Christmastime celebration. And so yeah, be sure to check out the recipe. Be sure to check out my book. You can find it in audiobook, ebook, and print forms. You can buy the deluxe Christmas box, order that from me to have it sent directly to you. And yeah, thank you for joining me and answering all my questions and hearing me ramble on about Christmas traditions. And now my voice is officially gone, so I'm going to sign off. Hopefully we'll be back by next Thursday when I do another bake along. So Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.